We're getting back on track here with Catherine and Emily, but as you know, we won't stay there for long because this is the Going Off Track podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I'm Catherine, that's Emily, and super quick turnaround. We have a race this weekend. It feels like we went racing 5 minutes ago.
Which is so exciting, though, because we had no racing for so long, and now it's like, race.
Yes.
It is a sprint weekend, unfortunately, but we still have racing. Super exciting. Yeah, we're in China. It's so early this year.
China is A, so early, and B, like, China's not terrible for a sprint race. It is a track that isn't like the most conducive, but we got good sprint racing last year, so we can only hope that we will also get good sprint racing out of this race this year.
Agreed. And I think it's always, I think China is more of a fun and interesting weekend just because for majority of the people on the grid, the first time they've raced it was last year.
Right.
So, as we're all aware, 5 years later, whatever, which is so weird to think that it's been 5 years, 4 years. China was on the calendar for several years, but it was skipped for COVID restrictions and travel restrictions. So last year was the first year we actually had China on the calendar and raced there since, I don't know, forever ago. Like
it was a lot of years.
Yeah, a lot of years. My dog is so grumpy today. I apologize in advance for this entire episode to all of you. He's just been humbugging around. He'd think he works a 60-hour-a-week job, but really he's just a 14-year-old who has 5 beds and gets all the treats he wants. So tough life. But yeah, so it's been a while since we're in China. We have a lot of rookies this year who've never seen the track. We have people who...
And I just checked. It was not an F2 support race last year, so even the F2 drivers did not, so now we have more drivers who have never driven this track.
So it's either their second or first time seeing it, woohoo, and it's a sprint weekend. I know we're not supposed to talk about this, but I am nervous about the rookies. They scare me. And I mean that in the best way possible. They're just these sweet little baby innocent children, and they just tear up the track. Hopefully Australia was a fluke because of weather.
Yeah.
But it's sweet little Ollie Behrman who crashed a few times going into the weekend or in the weekend. You've won free practice and then you're qualifying for sprint. So it just, I don't know. It could be very interesting to see how things shake out and how qualifying works if there's damage and stuff.
Yeah, like you said, the biggest thing about China and just about the sprint format in general that's going to be, not going to say tougher on the rookies in general, because the F2 format is so different with they have a sprint race and a feature race every weekend. Right. But this is still, you get one practice session. You're not all that familiar with the car. You got a lot of learning in the cars in Australia, but you also got a lot of learning in very difficult conditions if you survived the first 5 laps of the race. So if your name is Kimi Antonelli or Ollie Behrman or technically Liam Lawson and Gabriel Bertoletto made it to lap 34. So they had some time to learn, but still not that much.
Right. And I think Australia was a learning opportunity for everybody.
Yes.
But I don't know how much of it will transfer to China just because I know when I drive my civilian car, I drive differently when it's raining out and horrible conditions versus when it's dry. So yeah. I feel like the car is going to feel different. The setup's going to be completely different. Yes, they have experience and laps in an F1 car, but how much does it really translate this weekend? I don't know. And also going back on sprint format. So if you're newer to F1, got into it because of Drive to Survive, randomly fell upon us. Catherine and I hate sprints. I will say they're getting better.
The format they introduced last season is better.
It is. But there's still sprints and they still need to fix the weekend. But the way this weekend will work versus Australia is instead of having free practice 1, 2, 3 quali race, we'll have free practice 1, and then we have sprint qualifying, and then we have sprint, and then we have qualifying, and then we have race. So that's what we're saying of, those free practices, they don't mean anything, but it gives the driver opportunity to get comfortable around the circuit. And I think the rookies need as much help as they can get right now, just again, because they're rookies and this wasn't a support race last year. They've never seen China. So it'll be really interesting. I don't know. I think it
Yeah.
might like throw a wrench into everything again.
I
But
mean, it probably will. The margins are razor thin in a especially in a sprint race situation. I don't necessarily know if I would want a sprint race in my second race of the year in general. So I thought that that was a really interesting decision to make us endure. But this is what we're living with, so I guess we'll see.
we're adding more sprint weekends, so like we have to spread them out more. You know what I mean? Like they can't have them back to back to back to back in the middle of the season. So I mean, like logistically, it makes sense, but in theory, I don't think it's a good idea in
Yeah,
practice.
yeah, I do think like back to back sprints, like last year, China, Miami were back to back, and that was just. I mean, Miami's a bad track in general, let alone a bad track for
Ugh, I
sprints.
know, I hate Miami.
We've talked about how Monaco should probably be a sprint race, but it'll never happen. But
No,
we would totally love
not
for it to be.
should. It has to be a sprint race,
Yeah,
Catherine. With
but
a mandatory pit.
well, there's
Can
two
you
mandatory pits
imagine?
this year.
I know, but like a sprint
Ooh, a
race with a
mandatory sprint
mandatory,
pit.
right?
Ooh,
Ooh,
that could
I
be really
know.
interesting.
We
We
have
might be able to
fixed
fix
sprints.
Monaco.
We have fixed Monaco. It'll be so exciting. Full
Yeah.
racing.
Speaking of sprints, taking a little bit of a detour, sticking in Southeast Asia though, there has been news this week about F1 talking to the Thai government about a sprint race in the vicinity of 2028 in Bangkok, which
Yes.
could be interesting. Obviously, every country in the world is clamoring for a Formula One race, whether it's South Korea or Turkey or Rwanda or South
India,
Africa,
South Africa,
India, like everybody
Argentina.
for obvious reasons, everyone wants in on Formula One. So the Thai government has agreed to commission a feasibility study into how hosting a Grand Prix weekend would impact Bangkok specifically. They do have an accredited FIA track in the northeast of the country. It's about 6 hours away from Bangkok, but they want a sprint race in the city, and it would be a massive boost for the country's infrastructure if that was something that they would be committing to between now and 2025 and 3 years from now in 2028. Will there be room in 2028 on the calendar? Who the heck knows? But they're gonna start
The
rotating
revolving door of
what
F1
tracks
tracks.
are
I'm
are
so
on
excited.
are on what year. And obviously this is also very relevant because we do have a Thai driver on the grid right now who could very well still be on the grid in 2028 if Williams continues on the same track, in Alex Albon, who is driving under a Thai license.
Yes. That'd be cool for him. I can't imagine the helmet we would get
Oh
for
my
Albon
god.
in his home race. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Sold.
It's so interesting to me that they would want to do like an in-city, like street track sprint weekend. I wonder, and the feasibility study will tell us, but I wonder how feasible it would be in a city like that to, block off major portions and turn that into an F1 track for. I mean, we've seen how long it takes to set up Vegas for the sprint week or for the Grand Prix weekends. It's
Yeah.
like it's a 4 month ordeal just to start getting seats in, let alone the weekend itself where you've got the streets blocked off, but then the strip is opened up during the day because the casinos wanted it to still be accessible throughout the weekend. So how that would impact, the city itself would be really interesting. And I don't know if that would happen.
Well, but I feel like Vegas is such a different
I mean,
beast,
Vegas
right?
is a shit show.
Because like yeah, and like honestly, my take, that is the one weekend of the year I don't want to be in Vegas. Like holy moly, absolutely not. But we have other street races where it's not as big of a deal. Like Monaco does it. They throw up, they
They
throw
shut
down.
down Monaco.
Right. I mean, yeah, they shut the whole thing down, but I think it would be fine. I don't see it being as big of an issue as Vegas. I really don't. But
Well,
just
we'll
to
see.
see if they would even be able to have streets that would be ready for it. Because like Vegas even had issues and they had resurfaced
Right.
everything and the manhole thing, right? So
And the
I don't know.
manhole cover incident. Yeah, no, it's a question of that. Like the streets, are they wide enough? Where are you going to put people to sit? It would be
Yeah.
very interesting to see the like as Thailand goes through the process to see how that goes, and if we do get an actual F1 race there, like the start to finish process, I
I
think will be
really
very
want to know
interesting to
how
see.
that works, you know, coming off of watching White Lotus right now and they're in Thailand and like the streets have markets out to like 2 feet apart and then you can like barely walk because there's only 2 feet to walk. And like I don't know how, I mean, obviously that's not every street in Bangkok, but like every single street looks like it's filled with markets and people. So it would be very disruptive. But I don't know. It'd
Yeah,
be interesting.
it would be
We
it'd
love
be
to
really
see a
interesting.
rotation. We love to see a rotation. We've talked about this at nauseum. Catherine wants Malaysia to come back.
I do.
I want to see a race, you know, in South Africa. Um, and we just want to see more tracks that are more interesting. Imola.
Then
But yeah, I
Miami.
think and Miami. And I think we've talked about this. We love the idea of like certain tracks being on rotation on each continent so we don't have all the same ones. I would lobby for like Spa and Monaco, Coda,
Monza.
Brazil every year, Monza, but then we can, you know, oh, Suzuka. Okay, we've named like half the calendar, but you get the idea. We can switch them out. I don't know. I think this regionalization has just opened the doors to, you know, new
I do
tracks.
ultimately think that's what F1 is moving towards, is we'll have a core group of races. I just feel like knowing Spa already is going to be off the like has extended through the early 2030s, but is off the grid, I think in
Which doesn't
2020,
make
or off
sense
the
and I
calendar
hate.
2028. I feel like they're going to do that, but I feel like they're also going to choose tracks that are going to be like the non-permanent calendar fixtures that
I
are going to
know.
be dumb, like Imola. I don't think it's going to
Yeah.
be Imola, but like something dumb like that.
I mean, leave it to them to screw something up, you know.
Yeah.
But
So this will be really interesting, and I'm really interested to continue watching the process of all these countries that are trying to make bids to have F1 come and come to their countries. So this is going to be
honestly, it's
really
all going to
fascinating
be
to follow.
down to like who's willing to give them the most money. Like which
Hmm.
country wants to fork over the most money and they will be on the calendar. Um
Exactly.
money talks for sure. So this is super random before we get into China. I mean, it's China adjacent. But as the logistical, you know, weirdo on this podcast, have you seen the nightmare of logistics trying to get everything from Australia to China?
I have seen a little bit, and I totally forgot to put that in the rundown, but some of the cars are stuck in traffic.
Yeah, like literal traffic. But this, they call it the traveling circus for a reason. They have regionally, like, hangars, if you will, where they store things. So they don't have to ship everything to every race. But with this being in the same region, they're shipping everything to China. And I guess there's been plane delays and issues. And so, yeah, I think there's like 4 or 5 teams that are affected where all their stuff is getting there like tonight.
Yeah.
Um, for tonight or tomorrow, which like gives them absolutely no time for setup or anything before free practice one. With this being a sprint weekend as well, you don't have as many free practices to like make adjustments to the car. You free practice one and then you're already in, you know, qualifying for the sprint. So I don't know. It should be interesting.
Yeah,
I don't know.
this is we I think we hear of like travel snafu kerfuffles like once a year. I believe last year there were a couple teams that got stuck between Coda and Mexico City. There was some cars that got stuck at the border. I think it was Haas. I think it was Haas.
Of
And
course it was
of
Haas.
course it was Haas. But like and speaking of, that's why Haas, the American team, has a base in Italy, other than the fact that they're like Ferrari in a different hat, which is a total other longer story if you're new and you don't know the whole long history of the existence of Haas. Basically, Haas exists because of Ferrari, but not the same way that Racing Bulls exists because of Red Bull. But anyway, Haas has its Italian base so that they don't have to ship everything over from the United States and from, I believe they're in North
North
Carolina,
Carolina.
every time they need to like do something or they build a new car part.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah.
But
The logistics are
anyways,
fascinating.
it is. It really is. And like Okay, so I'm on this weird side of Instagram Reels because I refuse to get on TikTok. Just
Same.
I just won't. Because I know if I do, I'll just turn into a monster. So, I'm on this weird, weird side of Instagram Reels for like equipment managers for pro sports
Okay.
teams. I don't know how I saw one, but I saw one and they just like kept showing up of them watching them like set up, break down, having to like move all everything around, get everything on the plane, get it to the arena, go, and I'm just
Oh,
like,
I watched those videos
what
on
a
YouTube.
fascinating life, you know? And I'm just thinking at this scale, and like one of them for an NBA team, right? So there's like what, 15 players, not doing a lot. And then you have a whole freaking car. You have two cars for two drivers, the whole garage. I'm just thinking, like, I'm looking for Steak or Haas to come out with a video of like put up teardown of a weekend because I know I like their social media so much. They're so good.
Yeah.
Or any of them. I'll take anything, honestly, even the unfunny ones. I just want to see something. I think it'd be interesting. All right, well, that's all we have, really. Super light week, even though we, spend 15 minutes talking about nothing. Welcome to the podcast. But we do have an F1 Academy update because this is their first race of the season. So at the end of this episode, Catherine's going to do a good debrief for us because she's the best.
Thanks.
Okay, so China. Weather's looking good. I
Yes.
feel like the rookies can like breathe a little bit. But yeah,
It's going to be
China.
humid though.
It is. It is going to be very, very humid. And so I was looking forward to China originally because I'm like, oh, it's Zhou's home race, but he's actually not on the grid this year. I mean, he kind of is. He's a reserve driver for Ferrari. I'm sure he'll be there.
Yeah.
But he had such a cool helmet last season. I'm really excited, hoping we get some really cool helmets. I haven't seen any yet, but
Yeah.
I've also been under a rock today. So
You haven't seen any yet.
okay, we haven't seen any yet.
Yeah.
Yay. But I am excited to see them. We always love the alternate helmets, and this is the weekend that graced us with the panda helmet from last year from Alex
Oh my
Albon,
god, the
which was
panda
the absolute
helmet.
best. I know.
Such a good helmet. Oh my god, I miss that helmet so much.
I know, it was so good. But yeah, so last year it was also a sprint race. This year it's also going to be a sprint race. I would say nothing too exciting happened last year.
No, our
Besides
biggest
Joe's like tribute, but
yeah, they did a really great recognition for, obviously it was Zhou Guanyu's home race. He got to like park on the start finish grid at the end of the race, even though he finished 14th, but they wanted to recognize him because he was the first Chinese driver in Formula One, let alone to drive in his home race in China.
yeah,
So that was really cool.
it's a pretty big deal.
And shockingly, he finished in 9th in the sprint race, which was just off the points. And we had no idea at that time of year, because this was what, race 4,
Yeah.
that he was not going to score a point until Qatar. And that Steak was not going to score a point until Qatar. So like that was one of the closest that he was able to get to just sniffing points, and we were just so mad that he didn't end up in the points, because like had it been a regular Grand Prix, he would have.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, what Max dominated. That's just kind of the story of Checo.
Yes.
Actually had a good weekend in China.
This was one of the last few.
It was all downhill from here for Checo.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it was. Hold on.
No, I think it was China. Like he wasn't doing great, and then it was China. It's like, oh wow, he actually doesn't suck. And then it was like, oh wait, no. Reaffirm. He sucks.
China was his last podium last year. He finished 4th in Miami the following week, and then after Imola, it just went straight down the what. So yes,
Love that for him,
because he was P2, P5, P2, P3 with another podium in the sprint, and then that was just kind of it. Well, he finished 3rd in the sprint in Miami and 4th in the race, but then bye. And then we started the discourse.
Never to be heard from again. He just bought like a huge penthouse in Miami.
He did. So we'll probably see him in Miami. And the family just got a new puppy.
Oh, I'm not on that side of Instagram Reels. Oh, I refuse to follow him.
I follow the wife. She posts videos of the puppy every once in a while. It's very cute.
No, I saw it was like a business post or something about his purchase.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting to it. When I saw that, I was like, it was like a collaboration post with some real estate
Yeah,
firm, and it was like,
him awkwardly
okay.
standing there in every
I mean, he's
sponsored
awkward
ad.
in social media, like in general.
And
That's
now he
just not
lost the
his
Red Bull
forte.
PR team, so it's like now he's a really well, maybe not. He's taking a different role in Red Bull. I don't know. We've spent way too much time talking about Checo when he
Yeah,
doesn't deserve
why
the
don't
light
we
of
just
day. Let's
dive
jump
into
into
our
our
predictions?
predictions. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Get me off of this side of the pod, please. Okay, so China's a sprint. So, friends, we have two sets of predictions this weekend. We'll have our predictions for sprint pole, sprint podium, and sprint P8 because P8's the last place on the grid that you get a point in the sprint. Whew, lots of words. And then for the actual race, the Grand Prix, we'll have the pole, podium, and P10 because that's the last place on the grid where you get points is P10. So
Yes.
there we go. Sprint, and for our scoring, because I know it's so important, and we're so good at this. Sprint race does receive the same amount of points as Grand Prix. Why? Because they're both equally as hard. And we don't discriminate against sprints. Just kidding, we
Yes.
do. Okay, so Catherine, China 2025 sprint pole. Who do you have?
I'm going to go with Lando for this one. I think that the McLarens are still going to be a little bit set ahead of everyone else. And so until somebody can wake up, whether that's Ferrari strategy or Red Bull engineering, I think we're going to have some pretty solid papaya up at the front going over the next few races.
Okay, love it. I'm sticking with the papaya theme. However, I picked Oscar.
Okay.
I think he's coming back with a vengeance. And
I
he
hope
does
so.
really, really good in sprints. So I have
Yes.
Oscar. Okay, so that brings us to our podium. And reminder for all of you, Catherine and I are changing up our podium points. If we get everybody but in the wrong order, we are gracing ourselves with, 3 points because that is equally as challenging. 5 points if we get it in the right order. So who do you have for your sprint podium?
So I have what people are calling the new Hambot Ver, which if you don't remember for years, the top 3 finishers were tended to be Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas, Max Verstappen. So I have the new Hambot Ver, which is Oscar, Lando, Max.
Yeah. So same. I have Oscar, Lando, Max as well for my sprint podium. Yeah, I don't know. Nothing. It's not exciting, but maybe we need to mix this up if we're not allowed to pick the same order race after race. Because I feel like we'll just keep picking that. But then we're setting ourselves up for failure.
I'm not always gonna pick, the new Hambot Ver. So
Fair.
we'll see if teams decide to surprise us this weekend. See Ferrari.
Yeah, I know. It was honestly really hard picking China. One, because it's a sprint. Two, because I can't really take anything that came out of Australia. So
right, we didn't learn anything.
We didn't
useful.
learn anything. We learned that Ferrari still needs a strategist, and they lost a strategist when they lost Carlos Sainz.
Yes.
Okay, and then for sprint for P8, I have Alex Albon, which I don't love, but I couldn't think of a better person. So
I, like you, I also had trouble with picking everything this weekend. I went with Fernando, which is probably like totally off, but we'll see.
Yeah, I feel like I know. The sprint is honestly a crapshoot. Because I'm in my mind I'm banking on the Ferraris being higher and then like Williams dropping a few, and so that's like how I came to Albon and P8.
Yeah, but I don't disagree with you, but I'm just like, but then remember how bad Ferrari did. But does that just because they can't predict things in the wet? I don't know. So
see, and this is, me. There's no pitting and there's no strategy to pit in a sprint race. So how badly can Ferrari mess this up? I say that and they're going to end up hitting someone on the sprint race because of a puncture.
Hey, Lewis, hit the K1 button. So
oh my gosh. Okay, so that's for sprint. And then for the race, who do you have on pole for the race?
I split the difference between McLaren's and I am going with Oscar, which probably means that I have flipped what's actually going to happen, and Oscar will get the sprint pole and Lando will get regular pole. So,
and that's what I'm betting on because I put Lando on pole for the race. Because here's the thing too. I feel like they're just gonna like give Oscar a little carrots here and there to like keep them in constructors and also keep them a little happy. So I'm like, here, buddy, you can have the sprints, but
Yeah.
Lando's taking the race. So okay, and then with that, who is your race podium?
I'm not happy with my pick, but I'm not going to change my mind about this. I'm going Oscar Max Lando.
Oh,
So
so
instead
you
of Oscar Lando Max, I'm going Oscar Max Lando.
okay? I have Lando Oscar Max. So like, hopefully we get 3 points.
At very least, we might get points just for hopefully. I mean, George is probably going to do something that's going to like ruin it for the
How
both of
dare
us.
you bring his name up on this podcast, Catherine?
I mean, I have to.
Yeah, but like, we're not talking about him right now. We have to talk about him when we have to, but like, we don't have to talk about him now.
Wow.
Okay, for the race,
P10.
for P10. Thank you. Lost my train of thought. Also, my notes are not making sense to me. So P10, who is your P10 for the
I
race?
am going with Isaac Hajar Redemption, and
Ooh,
I think that
that.
I'm going with Isaac this weekend.
Oh, I really love that. That's a good one.
Yeah,
I have Lance Stroll because he's my token P10 because I feel like he's not better than that. So
okay,
noted.
I mean, he did finish what, P6, 7?
Yeah, but we had 5 people DNF and the Ferraris were Ferrariing. So like, I feel like P6 is not real. I feel like P10 is more realistic.
I mean, I think like P13 might be more realistic, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see who else disappoints. So it could be. We didn't learn, like we said, we didn't learn jack squat about the teams in general in Australia, and we still won't learn all that much about the teams in China until we go to Japan, and Japan is a regular Grand Prix weekend, and we'll probably get the most information on what the teams are all going to look like there.
Yeah. Okay, well, now for our funsies. So, biggest surprise of the weekend. I'm really excited about mine.
Okay.
I'm gonna go first.
You go.
So, I have that Kimi is going to have another killer weekend. I also have that he will be finishing ahead of his teammate George Russell.
Okay. Kimi beats George. Speaking of Mercedes drivers, I mean, no, Toto, you cannot keep looking for Lewis on the timing screens, which Toto mentioning that he like kept looking out for Lewis on the timing screens. I'm just like, oh, he's still adjusting. That's so cute.
Well, but also it's like, you know, I feel like it's a father-son relationship thing, you know?
Yeah.
They worked together for so long and he wants him to do well. He only wants the best for him. He left on good terms. You know, I don't know. I think it's sweet.
World's weirdest divorce. I don't think there's a bad thing with it. I think that it's cute that like Toto has to like remember like, oh, that's not my driver anymore. But speaking of not his driver anymore, my surprise is that Lewis is going to have a better weekend with Ricky, his race engineer, and we're not going to hear as many dramatic radio calls. So I will be surprised if that happens.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay, and then who's gonna do an oops this weekend in China, Catherine?
My oops is that Haas is going to continue being turtles.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like I said last time, I think Ollie Behrman really, really hit the turtle speed just so he wouldn't crash.
Yes, but that doesn't explain Ocon.
I know, there's no excuse for him, which is fair. And then speaking of rookies, so I said that the rookies in general. I know that's kind of brutal, but like we were saying earlier in the pod, there's just one free practice and they go right into qualifying. And I don't see it being a clean weekend for them. I see them really struggling with the format of sprint weekends. Besides Kimi. I think Kimi's going to do pretty well, but yeah.
Yeah. And I just think that Isaac is gonna have a better end to his weekend, similar to how he had a good start to his weekend.
So. Yeah, no, he for sure is going to have his redemption weekend. I hope such good things for him. He seems like such a sweet kid. And he's so, like, I love how, like, I don't know the word for it. I do. But just, like, he doesn't care how much people know that he loves Lewis.
Yeah.
Like, he's so so willing to let his obsession flag fly. I love it. It warms my soul. I feel like most people would be like, oh yeah, no, like Lewis Hamilton. But he's like, oh my
Whatever.
God, I'm obsessed with him. Every time I go to shake his hand, I start shaking. Like, I think it's so cute. It's so sweet. So it is pretty cool if you think
Yeah.
about it.
I do think that the crop of rookies are good kids. I just think that this is going to be a difficult year for them, unless you're, Kimi Antonelli, who is, of course, the second coming and the Italian Michael Schumacher. So
Yeah, we'll see.
we'll see. We're going to continue to be wrong about Kimi and all the things that we said about Kimi last year. We're going to continue to be wrong about that, but I do think that this might not be a good rookie weekend either.
Yeah. But I mean, we could probably say that for every single weekend, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, anyways, well, China will be super exciting, not only because we do have a sprint weekend, it's fine, but a dry weekend, so we can actually get some information on how teams are going to go this year. But it's also the first race of the supporting series of F1 Academy. So, for those of you who are newer, again, don't understand, don't know, F1 Academy is the female support series to F1. They have several races scattered throughout the weekend as support races for F1 weekends. I believe this year they have
Two
two. But
races
how
each
many?
weekend.
Right, 2 races each weekend, but there's 7 weekends.
Yes.
Yes. So there's 7 weekends. So we have China, Jeddah, Miami, Montreal, Zandvoort, Singapore, and Vegas. Spread out. Why we have 2 in the US, couldn't tell you. But in Montreal, I feel like Canada's just like not very exciting, but good for them. Very happy. Yeah, so this is their season opener. So last year, Abbi Pulling drove for Alpine. She was the champion. She did amazing. Absolute rock star. She has now graduated to the GB3 series, so we will not see her return. And we also have some other changes. Well, not some. We have a ton of changes. Also changes in the format and team. So, Catherine, what are the big things to look for this weekend that has changed from 2024?
Right. So we have, I would say that there are like 3 big ones. Now, this is the 3rd year of the F1 Academy. The first season, 2023, it was a really interesting and exciting season that nobody got to watch because it wasn't being broadcast anywhere. And then
Right.
going into last year, they're like, oh, we're going to broadcast everything, which you can watch all of the F1 Academy races. If you have F1 TV, it'll be on F1 TV streaming, but they also stream them on the F1 Academy YouTube channel. So you have pretty much any and every opportunity to watch depending on the time of races, because sometimes the races are in the middle of the night for us. So I will watch them in the morning. But the biggest change, and this is really where I think that F1 Academy is hitting their stride this year, is they've gone from 4 teams to 5 teams this year. They're adding High Tech / Toyota Gazoo Racing. High Tech is currently owned by Alpine team principal Oliver Oakes, who might only be the High Tech team principal, depending on how things go once we get to Spa, but we'll see. That is the running joke of Alpine team principals. But what's also really interesting about High Tech in the F1 Academy is they will only have 2 full-time drivers instead of 3. All the other teams have 3 drivers because they will host the wildcard driver every weekend, which is a driver typically from the region that gets picked to be a feature driver. They will be able to score points if they do. Last year, Prima Racing, they were the reigning champions. They are still the reigning champions. They also hosted the wildcard driver. So now the wildcard driver is part of its own team in High Tech.
Which I think is cool. And I think makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more fair because now every team will always have 3 drivers, even if High Tech will always have a different 3rd driver. And this probably means that High Tech will be last in the constructors standings. But in the F1 Academy, because you have the teams that the racers drive for individually, and like the F1 teams that they're partnered with, but then they also have the teams that they specifically race for, and that is a second championship that people don't really care as much about
No.
because of the F1 teams partnering with the specific drivers. So that is also something to keep an eye out for when you hear the names like Prema or Rodin or MP Motorsport, but then also that like Dorian Pond drives for Mercedes.
Yeah, exactly. And the scoring system has changed too this year.
Yeah, so this is actually pretty big. Last year, the scoring system was basically the F1 Grand Prix scoring system for both races. Now we will have basically like a sprint race, feature race type format where race one will get these typical F1 sprint race points, and race two will get the regular Grand Prix points. But additionally, they will get 2 points if you're the pole sitter. So if you get pole in the qualifying session, you'll get that. And they also still have the fastest lap point applied in F1 Academy in race two.
I don't know why we ever got rid of
F1
it.
F1 isn't really like, it's not missing it. Like, it didn't lose anything, but it also like didn't gain anything by not having it
Yeah.
this last race. But anyway, that's really different. And then the other thing that they are bringing back this year is they are bringing back the reverse grid. So now when we do qualifying in F1 Academy, they're really qualifying for the second race. We'll use the qualifying grid, and then the qualifying grid, the top, I think 8 or 10 will be flipped into the reverse grid for race one. So qualify, race one will have the reverse grid, and then they'll go into the typical grid for qualifying. So I think that that's going to be really interesting. I think it's really good because the qualifying process last year was not great, where basically
Yeah.
they just your top time was your race one qualifying and your second time was your race
Was
two
this
qualifying, but there was
Yeah.
basically no difference between them. They were like, there was very little change between races. So I do like that they're going to something a little bit more drastic, which I think will give a lot more drivers opportunities to score points, and it will give the top drivers, especially like the top returning drivers, more work to do to show off their skills.
I don't know. I'm still like out a little bit on the reverse grid. I feel like it's if you're the fastest, you should be able to start on pole. But what do I
Well,
know?
you
It'll be
do.
more entertaining for sure because there'll be more overtaking and things like
Yeah, I
that.
mean,
So
to that point, you still get pole for the race that is worth more points.
I know, but yeah. Anyways,
It's
so
it's just considering last year they needed to make a change, so they might as well
yeah,
try this again.
right. They're throwing everything into a hat and pulling out options, and this is the option for 2025.
Yeah, but also
So
to note before we go into the next bit is when they applied the reverse grid 2 years ago, they also had 3 races each weekend. So this will
fair.
still be different from the last time they did use the reverse grid, which also kind of didn't really work. So we'll see if it works better this time, or if they're going to need to change up more of the race weekend going forward.
Fair, fair, fair. So we've talked a little bit about this in our previous episodes on F1 Academy, but F1 Academy is meant to be a like springboard into other circuits. I'm kind of like what Abbi Pulling did. So there's a max of what 2 years? Yeah,
Yes.
there's a max of 2 years in F1 Academy. So we're gonna see a revolving door, a lot of new faces, lots of new drivers. If a driver's not back, it's not because they lost their seat. They most likely graduated out of F1 Academy. It's meant to
Right.
be a support race springboard for them to, be noticed by other circuits, other teams, and be picked up for the following season. So with that being said, there's a lot of shakeups. There's a lot of people who we have no idea who they are. We're just going to go through them kind of quickly, but just to kind of see where people landed and who their F1 sponsor is as well, if they are like a mentee of an F1 team.
Yeah,
So,
so to speak on that real quick for those of you who don't know, the drivers who are with specific teams are parts of those driver academies. So to
right.
start with Prima Racing, who are the defending champions again, Dorian Pan, she drives for Mercedes. She is a member of the Mercedes junior team.
Yeah.
So she's part of their umbrella. Tina Hausman, who is also a second year driver, she's with Aston Martin. She, is part of the Aston Martin Driver Academy.
Yeah.
And
And
then
then,
the third one, this is one that you and I are both really excited about because she was
yes.
the Zandvoort wildcard driver last year, Nina Gademan. She has replaced Abbi Pulling, who was the Alpine driver. So now it'll be Gademan at Alpine. So this is going to be her first year coming in. I'm really excited to see how she performs, and I'm really excited that they put her with Pan and Hausman in Prema, because I think that they, of the F1 Academy teams, Prima really knows what they're doing, and I think that it's going to be really exciting to see how they perform this year, both as individual drivers and as the constructor as a whole. Which it's not really a constructor because it's a spec series, so it's all the same car,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think this is just a good move for F1 Academy in general to show like this wild card position can turn into so much more. And that's why I love that they do this wild card because it gives people the opportunity to have a seat who like maybe wouldn't have one and they get to show their skill and then just like Nina get a seat next season. So I think it's a really cool concept. I don't think it would work in like F1, but I think it's really encouraging to see and really exciting to see they put this in place in F1 Academy. More women around the world are getting an opportunity in motorsport, and it's I think it's doing what it's intended to, is to find this local talent and put them on a larger scale. So really
Yeah,
exciting.
exactly. And I believe we have 4 of the 6 wildcard drivers from last season have made it into the academy this season, just because
Right.
there is so much room. So then moving on to the next team, Road and Motorsport, they have 3 new drivers this year. So they have Emma Felbermeyer. She is now driving for Kick, Sauber, Stake, whatever the hell you want to call them this week, which it depends on what country they're in. She's replacing their driver, Carrie Schreiner, who I believe is still staying on as a team representative. Then you have Ella Lloyd, who was one of the wildcard drivers last year. She was the Singapore wildcard driver. She is now the McLaren representative, replacing Bianca Bustamante, who moved up to a different series. And then Chloe Chong, her story is actually pretty interesting because she made the debut season of F1 Academy. She's driving with Charlotte Tilbury this year. So this is her second year because she did not race in 2024. They didn't have a place for her. And then this year they brought her on. She is replacing Lululemon Foss. The Charlotte Tilbury car is one of the
It's so
coolest
cool.
fun livery cars on the grid. And also, to speak to that, every driver has their own livery representing either their team or the brand that is sponsoring them. So we have some really cool liveries that you don't really see anywhere else.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so that's our first two. Next is it art or ART? I change how I
ART.
say this I call it art because it's easier.
I
But
know.
ART Grand Prix.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting group. They are bringing back 2 of their drivers, and then they have 1 new driver. So they're bringing back Leah Block from Williams, who had a really strong latter half of her debut season,
Yeah.
and I think that she's very capable of tearing things up this year. Then they have Aurelia Nobles, who is driving the Puma car, which if you have not seen the Puma car yet, both the
It's
car
really
and the race
cool.
suit are so cool. Like that and the Charlotte Tilbury car nail it with unique liveries. And then we've got Courtney Crone, who is replacing Chloe Chambers at Haas. Chloe Chambers, who is now in Red Bull Ford, and she is also the best performing Haas driver in the history of Haas because she's actually ended up on a podium. But we'll talk about her again in a second. But Courtney Crone is she was the Miami wild card, and she had a very strong weekend in Miami. So it'll be very interesting to see how she performs this year with Haas.
Yes. And then we get to MP Motorsport, and I think they have my favorite livery of all liveries.
Yeah. So MP Motorsport used to be the Red Bull team. They've now changed. The Red Bull team is now Campos, but they have Alba Larson, who is the Tommy Hilfiger
My
driver.
favorite
It's
livery.
such a cool
So good.
livery.
And
Yeah,
it's such a like Susie coded sponsor. I'm
it really
obsessed.
is. Yeah, so she's replacing Nerea Marti. Then we've got Joan Chicante. She's driving the F1 Academy car. So one of the F1 Academy drivers drives on the F1 Academy livery and the F1 Academy race suit. This is her first year. And then Maya Voog, who is the Ferrari representative. There's actually 2 women who are Ferrari Academy drivers, but she's the one who's actually represented by Ferrari. She has moved from Prima to MP Motorsport, which I think is really interesting. And Maya Voog, I think she finished in the top 5 last year.
Hmm.
She's a very strong driver. Like it was her, Abby Pulling, and Dorian Pon who had like a lion's share of the podiums last year.
Yeah. Oh, where are we? There's so many people this year.
I know. So
Campos.
Compost Racing, they were the solid middle of the pack last year. They are now the Red Bull team. Like I said, they have Chloe Chambers, she moved from Haas in the F1 Academy to Red Bull Ford in the F1 Academy, which is one of the three Red Bull teams because we also have Rafaela Ferreira, who is driving the Racing Bulls car. She is replacing one of the Alcobacy sisters, while Alicia Pomalski will be driving for Red Bull Racing, who is the Qatar wildcard, replacing the other Alcobacy sisters. So both of the Alcobacy sisters graduated out of F1 Academy last year, along with Emily DeHughes, who was the Red Bull Ford driver. So now we have all of the Red Bull drivers with Compost. I am sure Red Bull expects a lot more than how last year's Red Bull team performed. So it'd be very interesting to see how they go overall this year.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that they have three teams, but we've always talked about how they have such a big like junior racing academy.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives me a lot of, hope that they're also investing as much on the women's side as they are on the men's side with their driving academy. So
Yeah.
I know it's weird that they have three cars. I'm all for it. I love it.
I also do
Um,
appreciate that they do include the F1 Academy drivers in their social media, like, and
mhm.
all of like during race weekends with media, which Williams also did with Leah Block last year. Some of the teams did, but I think the ones that stood out the most who really like included the F1 Academy drivers along with the F2 drivers was Red Bull and Williams. So I
I agree.
appreciate that we got that from that. I would love to see more of that from the other teams as we go through this season.
Yeah. Last but not least, high tech TGR. So who are the new kids on the block?
So the two new kids on the block of the full-time racers, who I'm sorry, I'm probably going to butcher their names, but it is the American Express driver replacing Jess Edgar is Nicole Havarda. And then we have Avia Agonostadiatis. I think I got that right. She's going to be the other first-year driver. She's driving for Tech Heuer, which is obviously one of the new timekeeping sponsors for Formula One in general. So it is really cool to see them partnering with them as well.
Brain blast, Catherine. So you know how
Yes.
last year the F1 Academy car started as F1 Academy car and then it turned into the Charlotte Tilbury. No, it turned into the Tommy Hilfiger car.
Mm-hmm.
F1 Academy car this year. Oh, I have chills just thinking about it.
Louis Vuitton.
Covered in Louis Vuitton. Yes. Oh my god, I love it. It's such a good partnership. I see it in my mind. Just like, oh, the design, everything. I literally have chills. I don't know if you can see this, but I literally have chills. I have
Yeah.
goosebumps.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. That so that will be really interesting if Louis Vuitton comes through that. I think if anyone can come to that agreement, it would be
Or
Susie Wolf, who is the
Fenty.
managing director, or Fenty. Ooh,
We gotta call Susie.
gotta call Susie. Okay. And then the last driver, she's the Chinese wild card for this race. So she will only be racing the two races in China, is a driver named Shi Wei. She competes in Chinese F4. And she's also has some history with Toyota Gazoo Racing, which is probably one of the reasons why they identified
She's
her as the high-tech Toyota Gazoo Racing driver. And she's also done a little bit of endurance racing. So it'll be very nice to see at least a Chinese driver competing this weekend, especially because we don't have Zhou Guanyu in the car, even though he is, hanging out in the Ferrari garage and doing sim work for Lewis while Lewis is getting to know Ricky better.
love. All right. Well, lots to look forward to this weekend. Like Kevin said, you can watch all the F1 Academy races this season again, like last year. Still waiting on the Netflix documentary.
I'm dying for the Netflix
I don't know when
documentary.
it comes
It's
out.
probably gonna cover this year and it'll come out in
Probably.
26. So,
Fair, fair, fair.
but we're really
Um,
impatient for it because it's with Reese Witherspoon's Hello
Hello
Sunshine
Sunshine.
production company.
Yeah.
So that partnership is just I'm so excited to see how they do the behind the scenes stuff, just like how they do like Drive to
I'm just
Survive
excited to get Susie content,
and more Susie
honestly.
content because we did get a decent amount in the Toto heavy episodes of Drive to Survive, but always happy to have more Susie Wolf on our screens.
Yeah. Okay, well, that is all. I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else for China?
No, fortunately, it's been a quiet news week.
Yeah.
So now
Well,
we
we
just
only
get to
had like
focus
3 days, so.
yeah. Now we just focus on racing and seeing who is going to perform this weekend, and I think we have a lot of question marks, and we'll see how the rookies
As much as
recover.
it pains me to say this, like I do hope the rookies do well. Like I love the mess chaos and it is entertaining and but I like I said last time I don't want it to take too much away from the race. As long as it's really only Liam Lawson suffering, I feel like we'll be fine.
We'll see how he does, but
Well,
Red Bull's
anyways.
got work to do.
Definitely. All right, well, that is our China Grand Prix prediction episode. Up next, we will have our China recap episode, which will be out next Monday. That is it for the pod. Thanks for going off track with us, guys.